Hi, thanks for joining me. The way that fan hose photography emerged in the West was similar to the discovery of a time capsule. A photographic record that had been, in inverted commas, discovered after a long period of time. Almost all of his famous images were produced before he was 28 years old, and that means that he largely faded from the photographic scene by the early 1960s. By that time he had achieved some international recognition, but his work hadn't been exhibited widely. He said that he had fame but no fortune, and he needed to support his new young family, so he shifted into the world of filmmaking, first as an actor and then later as a director. His Hong Kong gallery, Blue Lotus, managed to keep his photographic work alive, but generally he had a really low profile. Later, when interest in his work grew in the West, audiences were nostalgically drawn to the subject matter. His images are alluring because they romanticize a period in which Hong Kong was seen as the gateway to the mysterious and exotic East. During the 60s and 70s, the city rapidly transformed into a modern megacity, eventually with McDonald's, Gucci, and Louis Vuitton. What stunned audiences most was the consistent aesthetic that permeated his extensive body of work. His precise compositions and his subtle use of light made his work instantly recognizable. During the period when Fan Ho was photographing, he would have been aware of the prominent photographers who were making an impact in Europe and the US. During the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, his influences would have probably been Brassai, Cortez, Weston, Penn, and probably the most impactful, Henri Cartier-Bresson. Fan Ho has been referred to as the Cartier-Bresson of the East, which to me seems a little off. He obviously internalized the idea of capturing dynamic moments, but he also molded his own unique personal style. It's strange, when you look at many of Fan Ho's photographs, you might think that he was photographing in a small village somewhere, rather than the overcrowded Hong Kong. His images often center on solitary figures, which is a rare thing in this densely populated port. But again and again, he seeks out this sense of peace and quietness by isolating his subjects. This attraction to a meditative stillness could have been in reaction to the circumstances that surrounded his family's move to Hong Kong. Fan Ho was born in Shanghai in 1931, and when he was 18, his fairly prosperous father, a merchant, moved the family to Hong Kong. China had experienced an extended period of chaos and political turmoil. At that time, the ruling KMT party, led by Chiang Kai-shek, was fighting against the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong. Before that, there had been a bitter 8-year war between Japan and China. Fan Ho embraced the relative calm of Hong Kong after all of the turbulence that he had witnessed. An interesting shape appears frequently in his compositions. It's the Chinese character that means person. It perhaps emphasizes the idea of individuality and uniqueness, the opposite position to what was being promoted on mainland China. He often favored a high-key tonal range. He wasn't just ramping up the contrast, he was selectively limiting the range of tones within his images by favoring the margins of the zonal system. He used this technique to simplify his compositions. By diminishing the mid-tonal detail, he reduces the distraction of secondary information. It has a very calming effect because it gives the images a soft, almost airbrush finish, much like Chinese inkwash paintings. In Western terms, this style would probably be viewed as minimalism. Michael Kenner is a perfect example of a photographer who seeks out beauty by choosing scenes that result in high-key images. There's a richness to Van Ho's work that comes from his deep knowledge of Eastern art forms. He studied Chinese literature at university, and he was also influenced by the great masters of Chinese poetry and painting. His inspiration wasn't limited to Eastern artists. He was very fond of Western classical music, especially when he was working in the darkroom. He strongly believed that in order to create art, one has to expand one's inner world through music, poetry, and basically all forms of art. For him, photography was transformed into art when one went beyond just getting the technical aspects right. Van Ho longed to direct films like Fellini. It would have been great to see what films he would have come up with if he had been given the opportunity to work in the art house arena. But he was employed by a movie company called the Shaw Brothers, and they produced over 1,000 films. So he landed up directing formulaic films with just the right amount of eroticism and violence. Even in his teens, he was drawn to the world of art cinema. He saw his photographic images as stills from a movie, each one telling a story. He used light and shadow as well as hazy mist to evoke emotions and add drama and mystery to his images. He was condensing his storytelling into a single frame, using the cinematic devices that he loved. You couldn't describe him as a purist. He was very happy to manipulate images in the darkroom. He experimented with multiple exposures and sandwich negs. He produced one of his most famous photographs called The Approaching Shadow as a conceptual piece. He posed his cousin against a wall, and she was looking diagonally down towards the approaching shadow. The triangle of shadow that dominates the visual structure of the image wasn't actually there. He burnt it in later while working in the darkroom. He wanted the image to symbolize the impermanence of youth, that everyone has the same destiny and that time spares no one. Van Ho was very keen on using geometry and shape to produce immediately impactful compositions. This was a tool used by Western photographers like Paul Strand in the 1910s and 20s. Van Ho also used the shapes that are produced when a pool of light is contrasted against the shadow areas. Harry Callahan would often seek out this type of scene. Van Ho was consuming all of these photographic approaches and applying them brilliantly to his Hong Kong cityscapes. Van Ho was a patient operator. He would find a location that had the potential for great shots, and then sometimes he would wait for hours until the perfect moment arrived. These images of stairways taken at the Central Market have all the right ingredients: strong backlighting, converging structural shapes, and ongoing opportunities to create patterns from the busy movement of people. Van Ho's photographs do have a likeness to some of Cartier-Bresson's work, but he manages to attach a very distinctive undertone or mood to his images. His photographs capture, I think, hesitant moments rather than decisive ones. I like the word limbic. In his case, he suspends visual elements within his compositions, which leaves the viewers unsure about the conclusion to his stories. His images toy with the part of the brain where dreams or memories are made. I don't think he was out to document Hong Kong. He blurred the lines between reality and fantasy to reveal the sense of the soul of the city. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.